Welcome to class PM. Now, we all know that every individual has started the life as a single cell, right? And we have seen level of organization like half unicellular has evolved out into multicellular. We better know that these cells organize or they divide and form a tissue, and these tissues divide further and form organs, and organs further divide and form organ systems, where it leads to a development or growth of an organism. Now, when we talk, we know that organism, like it is a single individual. When we say it is an organism, it is a single individual, right? There are group of organisms who are living together. Say like that forms a community, right? So there are a group of organisms living in a particular place forms a community. Say like you have a community where there are different religion people, different castes, creed, cultures are living together as a community, right? So you have so many people in a community, right? So we see that it is not only like community of say some place, a community belonging to some other place, a community belonging to some other place in your state, right? So there are different places in the state with different communities, right? So all these communities are brought up together, and these communities form an ecosystem. They form an ecosystem. So we know that an individual begins his life as a single cell, where group of organisms who are living together is said to be forming a community. There are various communities all throughout, right? And these group of communities together is said to be ecosystem. And you have different ecosystems on the Earth's crust, right? And these ecosystems together form a biosphere. So what is that I'm going to talk today about, right? Why am I again and again telling you the same thing? Like organisms, they form a community, and this community together are held as ecosystems. So what is that? What is the reason behind giving this explanation? I'll tell you, right? So as I told you, this biosphere, right? We know that in this chapter of natural resources, we have studied that there are biotic and abiotic components which keep affecting the biosphere, right? So we know that there are factors such as biotic factors which are naturally seen or present in the nature, and abiotic factors too, right? There are other abiotic factors which keep affecting the biosphere. So there is an interaction between these biotic and abiotic factors in the biosphere very frequently, due to which you can see that there is a transfer of matter and energy. So they keep reacting. It is not that they don't react with each other. They always keep interacting with each other. See, as we have interaction between you and me, the same way these biotic and abiotic factors of the biosphere keep interacting between each other, right? So these interactions generally lead to two different things, that is transfer of energy and matter. Transfer of matter. So that means the interaction between these abiotic and biotic components always leads to two different things, that is transfer of energy and transfer of matter. Say like these components are always stable. Though they are being exchanged between biotic and abiotic factors, these are always maintained at stable rate. So let us now learn about what are the different cycles. What are the different cycles or different processes which are involved in the interaction of these biotic and abiotic factors. So let us learn about the interaction which is taking place in between these biotic and abiotic factors, that is nothing but biogeochemical cycles. Let's learn about biogeochemical cycles. So these biogeochemical cycles are the various processes which lead to interaction between biotic and abiotic factors. So under this processes, we are going to learn various cycles, and now first let us begin with the first type of geochemical cycle, that is water cycle. I think right from primary classes, you have been learning about water cycle. We all know that water is one of the major source on the Earth's crust, or you can say 3/4 of our Earth's crust is covered with water, where we find this water in two different forms. One is as fresh water and the other is marine water, right? What are the sources actually? What are the different sources of water? We have different sources of water. Say like the sources of water are of different types. First, let me write the forms. Let me mark forms of water. There are different forms in which the water is available. The water is available in the form of marine water and fresh water. So when you talk about these sources of marine water, you can say there are seas, oceans, right? When you talk about fresh water, you have sources like rivers, lakes, ponds. You can also have groundwater also. So these are the various sources of water. And you might be wondering, like as I've told you, 3/4 of the Earth's crust is covered by water, out of which the marine sources occupy the major portion. That means the water which is available on the Earth's crust is mostly in the form of marine. And you have very little percent of what you call is fresh water. So when you talk about this fresh water, you might be wondering, like how come? Though we have very little of fresh water available, how is this possible? Like every single day you get water to drink, you get water to carry out your daily activities, you get water for industrial purpose. See what not, every step of our daily activity needs water. That might be really a wonder, like how come very little portion of fresh water available is still being seen on the Earth's crust? Yes, there is always a thing which will recycle these natural resources, right? We are blessed that our natural resources can be recycled or replenished, right? So when they can be recycled, due to this recycling process, we are filling up the sources so that we will not fall short of water. So now when we talk about this water cycle, let me give you a brief description which you have been learning from primary classes. You all know that sun is the source of energy, right? The solar energy, we get solar energy, right? And we know that the broad daylight is because of sun, right? The sun which is present, he is said to be the ultimate source of energy. And we do have oceans, rivers, seas, lakes, ponds, right? And we know that the surface of water gets quickly heated than the land, right? And we know that the sources of radiation which are available or which actually fall over the surface of the water, they heat up the surface, right? Heat up the surface where you see that this water on the topmost surface will become hot, right? We all know that when the air becomes hot, it becomes lighter, right? So these water droplets are carried up into the atmosphere in the form of vapor. You can say in the form of vapor. The steam is lighter, right? So it has been carried up, raised up into the atmosphere. As the vapor rises up into the atmosphere, we see that slowly they form clouds. Right? And these clouds, what do they have? Nothing but they have droplets of water. And when the cloud cannot hold these droplets, we know that water is always a liquid, right? And we know the arrangement of particles of liquid. They are loosely arranged but in pairs, right? So they start bombarding with each other. What do you mean by bombarding? Bombarding means the particles start hitting each other in the compact closed cloud, right? So you know that we see huge clouds, sometimes we see smaller cloud, right? So the particles, when they get energized, they possess kinetic energy, they get energized, and due to this kinetic energy, they start hitting each other, bombarding. So finally what happens? They collide with each other and precipitate down in the form of rain. So slowly you can see they condense. They take the cool air, the clouds take cool air from the other parts of the atmosphere and slowly they condense down to form what? Rain, or they precipitate down as rain. Where do this rainwater go? Yes, there are different means. Like it is not that the rainwater which is actually poured down onto the Earth's crust directly gets into the seas and oceans, right? There are also different things where the rainwater gets absorbed into. So what is happening? Now water is getting evaporated. It has been condensed down, poured down as a rain. So the amount of water which is evaporated is again reaching back the Earth's crust. This cycle where the water has been recycled is said to be water cycle. But we know that how is this water cycle been replenished, right? So when you talk about recycling of this water, it is not only purely what you call what seas, oceans or lakes or other sources take up the water of the rain, but sometimes, not sometimes, very often, no, it's a common thing where we see that the rainwater seeps into the ground, right? Nowadays, most of our places are having good roads which are built up with cement and everything, due to which there is no seepage seen into the underground level. That is the reason where the underground water is getting depleted. The water table is getting depleted. In olden days, it was like only cities and towns used to have good roads, and almost all the villages used to have the kacha roads, which are of mud and other particles, where as soon as it used to rain, the rainwater used to get seeped into the soil, where you can see that they are being actually stored underground, right, in the water table, where that can be taken out in the form of tube wells or in the form of bore wells, where we get the water out of the ground, right? But nowadays, because of our deeds, we don't have the convenience of seepage of water into the soil. And you know that these water which gets seeped into the soil, sometimes it is not only into the soil they get seeped, they get seeped into the cracks of the rocks and big mountains and rocks, where we know that these rocks are formed of many minerals, right? So the minerals which are present get seeped into this water. When they are flooded, they take away the minerals, and what do? They actually fix it into the water bodies. They flush these minerals through the water and fix them into the water bodies, which are used up by the aquatic organisms, We all know sea and ocean water has plenty of minerals present in it, abundant minerals. And you know, most of these aquatic organisms, they do have exoskeletons and endoskeletons. I can just give you an example of one. Like you can say the shells, mollusks, right? You can see a snail, right? Where the snail will be carrying a shell on its back, right? So what is the shell made up of? It is made up of mineral, calciums, carbonates of calciums, right? Carbonates of calcium. So that is forming an exoskeleton which will protect the insect inside. In the same way, there are other animals also, like sponges, right? There are other animals in the oceans and seas which form their exoskeleton using these minerals, which actually come in the form of seepage through the rainwater. So this is how the water has been recycled. It not only seeps into the ground, it will also carry the nutrients which are present in the soil and flush them into the rivers or other water body sources, where the other organisms use up these to form their exoskeletons, and sometimes they also use up these nutrients for their growth. So this is how you can see. So what exactly you mean water cycle is? It is nothing but the water, the whole process where you see that the water getting evaporated, falling back onto the land, and later flowing back into the seas and oceans is known as a water cycle. And please remember, this water cycle is not a straight process. It's not a straight driven process. It is a hooked up process where you see the water has to get evaporated, then condensed down, it pours down as the rain, and most of the rain reaches seas and oceans, and the rest part of the rain which seeps into the soil will get converted into groundwater, and the rest which seeps into the cracks of the rocks will carry the nutrients. So this is how you can see the water cycle being recycled on the earth's crust. So now please don't wonder like how are we able to get water every single day. That is because of recycling of water, which is a natural process and naturally done in the atmosphere, so that we can have plenty of water. So I just wanted to say one thing, like please don't waste water, because nowadays the fresh water sources are depleting. Okay, and when these start depleting, you definitely see that the water sources which are available will also get depleted, and due to which we may fall short of water, which will definitely lead to a situation where people start fighting literally for the water. So it is not only the recycling of water is done, you also need to observe that there is also depletion of water which is done, and this will ultimately lead to acute shortfall of water, which will ultimately lead to a drought condition. So save water for the future generations. The next cycle which we are going to learn is nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen cycle. So we all know this nitrogen makes up almost a major portion of the earth's crust. It is like almost 78% of earth crust is covered by nitrogen, and this nitrogen which is present in the earth's crust is not readily available, right? And generally you know that this nitrogen which is present, it is one of the important part for the survival of life. I'll tell you how. Because it helps in making up of proteins, DNA. It helps in making proteins for the life. DNA, that is nucleic acids. You know what is the importance of DNA in the human body, right? Not only human body, and even in other organisms, living organisms also. So vitamins, so all this we've been learning right from primary classes, vitamins, proteins. We know that proteins are called as building blocks of the body. That is because they help in growth of an organism. In the same way, vitamins, they act as defense mechanism in the body. The DNA which is present, it will inherit the characteristics to the next generations. So all these vital things which are important to carry out a life are being they possess nitrogen, right? In one or the other form, So this is said to be the most essential element of the Earth's crust, and it also present in abundance, like 78%. So where you see that it is also found in other biological activities, like see there are excreta of many organisms. You know what is excreta, right? The waste which is thrown out of the body. That also consists urea, uric acid. So all these are the waste, ammonia. So all these are the waste which are being produced by various living organisms. So they are biologically also released into the atmosphere in various forms, So you can say that it is an essential. So from this you can conclude that this is a most essential elemental form available on the Earth's crust. Now when we talk about this, where is this nitrogen present? See, this nitrogen is usually present in the atmosphere, and there are many organisms which cannot directly take up this nitrogen from the atmosphere. They need to rely on some other organism, or they need to find some other mechanism so that they can absorb these atmospheric nitrogen. So when you talk about this nitrogen, there are few bacteria and life forms which can actually convert this atmospheric nitrogen. See, as I've told you, please remember, every living organism is not capable of absorbing these nitrogen directly from the atmosphere. So there are few bacteria and other organisms which actually convert this nitrogen. So usually these are found in dicot plants like pulses, right, and beans. So these plants of beans and dicot plants, they have a structure. Say like if this is the root of a dicot plant, okay. So this dicot plant roots have small nodules on the surface of the roots. What is the importance of nitrogen in plant life? I'll tell you. The plant uses nitrogen to make a protein in the body. At the same time, they also use it for making chlorophyll. So, you know that the chlorophyll is the essential element in the plant body because it helps in making the food for the plant, right? So, as I've told you, many of the living forms cannot convert this atmospheric nitrogen into nitrates and nitrites. So they need to rely on other organisms. So plants such as beans, pulses, they have special roots where the roots are provided with nodules. And these nodules which are present, you know that in the atmosphere you have nitrogen, right? There is nitrogen present in the atmosphere. So what do they do? Let me write down atmosphere. The nitrogen which is present in the atmosphere. So what does these root nodules do? They take up this atmospheric nitrogen, okay, they absorb. And what is that which is helping them to take up this? The bacteria which is known as rhizobium. So as I've told you, there are few bacterial forms which can directly convert this nitrogen into nitrate and nitrites. So the atmospheric nitrogen will be taken up by bacteria called rhizobium and they'll fix it into the root nodules. That means they convert it into nitrates and nitrites, and fix it into the root nodules of the plants, where these root nodules use up this nitrates and nitrites to make protein, So this is how the nitrogen is usually fixed in most of the dicot plants. As I've told you, this cannot be directly used up or directly converted into nitrates and nitrites. You know, we know that the soil has moisture present in it, right? Usually, it is not only atmosphere which has moisture level, even soil has little of moisture present in it. So these nitrates and nitrites which are present or which are being absorbed by the roots, sometimes they also get mixed up with the moisture which is present in the soil. That means they get diffused into the moisture which is present in the soil and they turn up to be nitric acids. And we know that usually the evaporation process is a common thing which is seen on the surface of the land and also on the surface of water. So these nitrates which are dissolved into the moisture of the soil, they slowly get evaporated, which will turn into acid rains, And this is not only the source of fixing nitrogen into the atmosphere or fixing nitrates into the plant body. There is also another mechanism called as lightning. We know that the lightning during rainy season will fix up an energy, right? It has a lot of energy in it, right? You cannot just see the lightning continuously. You cannot even bear the lightning, right? So this lightning also will fix atmospheric nitrogen, which can be converted into nitrates and nitrites by most of the bacterial forms. So these nitrates and nitrites are used up by the plant to make protein. Now there comes a question like, how is this nitrogen been recycled? Okay, I've told you this has been fixed in such a way. I've shown you the fixation of nitrogen into the plant body. In the same way, we see that the plants are said to be the primary producers. Yes, we all agree. We all have to agree because plants will help in providing food for many of, not most of the organisms. So this nitrogen is fixed. So they use this nitrogen to make protein in the body. And when animals, they graze these plants, that means when they eat these plants, that means they're taking up nitrogen also along with the plant product, right? So when they die, and these nitrogen in the plant product, the protein in the plants is present in the form of amino acids. So these amino acids are taken up by other animals. When they eat these plants, they take up these amino acids into their body. So we see that sometimes after few years or say like few days, after few months, like generally death is a common thing, right? Every organism has to die. So when they die, they are discarded, they are left, right? And we don't go and conduct this funeral to all the plants and animals which are dead, right? So they slowly get decayed by the microorganisms which are present in the soil. So while the decaying is done, they return this nitrogen to the soil. Okay, the denitrification is done, where you see that there are few bacteria which will denitrify. That means they take out the nitrates and nitrites which are present in the dead bodies and then recycle it or replenish it in the soil. So this is how you can see the recycling of nitrogen taking place during lightning process by rhizobium bacteria. At the same time, the animals and the plants which die, they leave out these nitrates and nitrites into the soil because they consume those amino acids, right? This is how the nitrogen gets fixed. So from the atmosphere, it gets fixed into the roots of the plant, and at the same time, as the plants and animals die, this has been fixed into the atmosphere by few nitrogen based bacteria, that is Nitrosomonas, Azotobacter. What do? Is they denitrify. That means the nitrogen which is present is converted into atmospheric nitrogen. So atmospheric nitrogen is taken up, fixed as nitrates, and these nitrates, when plants die, they are being again converted into atmospheric nitrogen by denitrifying bacteria. So this is all about nitrogen cycle. Then the next cycle we are going to learn is carbon cycle. Now before I start with carbon cycle, I just wanted to ask you, where do we find carbon? Now don't tell me that atmosphere has 0.03% of carbon dioxide. That is a general fact which everyone knew. I just wanted you people to give me such answers like where we find carbon in our daily life. See, now very smart children, they replied that, ma'am, we have creams and we have face wash which are based on carbon molecules, right? Yeah, I do agree there are, but we know that this carbon is most essential element. Every living organism is made up of carbon and hydrogen, that is hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons. And this carbon in our daily life we come across through the exhaust of vehicles. When there is a smoke, right, it is a carbon. And you go to barbecues to eat food, yummy, delicious food, right? What do these barbecues they use to make the food hot? They have a grill which is placed over, the food is placed over a grill which is being supported by coal. Coal is a form of carbon, right? Petroleum which you use every day, it is a form of carbon. You know that there is important and interesting thing about carbon, that this carbon can exist in various forms. Carbon can exist in various forms, and this property of carbon of existing, and those forms are called as allotropes. What are they called? Allotropes. So usually this carbon which is present, it is present in the atmosphere in the form of an element like carbon, C, right? And it combines with various other compounds to form carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and it forms carbonates of sodium salts and carbonates of potassium salts, carbonates of magnesium salts, so many other salts, right? So this carbon, as I've told you, in the atmosphere, this carbon is present in the form of carbon and hydrogen. where we call these as together collectively called as hydrocarbons. So these hydrocarbons are nothing but here petrol, coal, right? Glucose. See, we know that during the process of photosynthesis, the final product or the end product which is formed after the process of photosynthesis is nothing but glucose. And what is the formula of glucose? C6H12O6, right? It has molecules of carbon and it also has molecules of hydrogen, right? In the same way, petroleum is a hydrocarbon. Your LPG gas which you use at home is made up of carbon, right? The diamonds, right? The jewelry which we generally women love to wear, those heavy stuffed jewelry which has diamonds. You have different types of diamonds, uncut diamonds, this diamonds, that diamonds. So what is this diamond? Diamond is one of the form of carbon, and we use graphite. What is this graphite? Graphite is also one form of carbon. So these are allotropes of carbon, right? So this carbon can exist in more than one form. So in the atmosphere, it is usually present in the form of carbon and hydrogen, which we generally call it as hydrocarbons. And as I've told you, this carbon salts are seen in various minerals. Okay, they are present in various minerals, and they are also present in various aquatic life, like they are present in the form of shells, and they are present in the form of exoskeleton, endoskeleton. They form salts of sodium, they form salts of magnesium, they form salts of other minerals, other salts also. So this carbon play important role. You know, this the food which you take, like molecules like protein, carbohydrates, fats, they also have carbon. So carbon is incorporated into our lifestyle. Without carbon, I think there is no compound. So there are many other elements which form compounds with carbon. So that is the reason carbon combines with oxygen to form carbon dioxide. Carbon combines with one molecule of oxygen to form carbon monoxide, right? So there are various things, and we see that the process of converting this carbon from the atmosphere and from the soluble forms of glucose, like glucose is in the form of soluble substance in the plant body through the process of photosynthesis, right? All this will help in recycling the carbon in the atmosphere. Usually the recycling of carbon levels is done through the process of photosynthesis and through the process of vehicular emission or carbon emission from the vehicles. And we know that the process of respiration by humans and other animals also will give out the carbon dioxide. And we know that these carbons will also help in combustion, right? Hydrocarbon, it will help in the process of combustion because it is present in the fuels like petroleum, right? And they are also used in industrial purpose, right? We generate thermal energy from the coal. What is coal? Coal is a carbon again, right? They are used for transportation. Earlier, in olden days, the trains were being run on coal, right? They used the loco pilot used to put coal into the engine to run the vehicle. But later on, we have modified into electric engines and some other engines, computerized engines and everything. But olden days, it was the first train which was run on coal, right? And we see that this coal is also transported to different places for many other purposes. They are used as a fuel. See, when you go to a laundry shop, you see that the person who is pressing your clothes, he uses coal in it, right, to press the clothes. So this coal is used in different forms, which is nothing but a form of carbon. So I should say that this carbon is one of the important form, but eventually I feel sad to say that the usage of carbon has now become a big problem, because the temperature which is being evolved out by usage of this carbon is slowly leading to global warming. Yes, because the exhausts of your vehicles, they emit out carbon, right? And these carbons, the carbon dioxide which is present, it will escape into the atmosphere. And you know what does carbon do? It will trap the heat energy and it will increase the temperature globally, and due to which the global warming happens. So this is one of the major drawback of carbon, but still you see that the carbon has been recycled. The next topic we are going to learn is greenhouse effect. See, the glass has a tendency to store heat in it. That's the reason you see that glass can easily trap the heat and light. That's the reason most of our windows are made up of glass nowadays, because we need good ventilation, so we put on glass windows so that there is proper heat and light being trapped into the house, right? So when this phenomenon actually was used to create an enclosure to grow plants. But gradually, this phenomenon started happening in the atmosphere. I just told you that this carbon which is present, it is increasing the temperature by trapping the heat. That means the carbon dioxide is trapping the heat energy, and this heat energy is gradually increasing the temperature, which is leading to the melting of ice caps or melting of polar regions. You see, the melting of Himalayas is because of global warming, So there are few gases in the atmosphere which are said to be greenhouse gases like methane, carbon dioxide, which are released into the atmosphere due to various biological activities and human activities, which are increasing up the temperature of the earth crust, which is ultimately leading to the melting of ice caps in polar regions. At the same time, the Himalayas melting down. So this is called as greenhouse effect. So next, let us learn about the other cycle, it is oxygen cycle. So the next type of cycle which you are going to learn is oxygen cycle. We all know that oxygen is one of the essential element, okay, which is present in the atmosphere, and though it is present only in 20 to 21%, every living organism needs oxygen. Why? Because we cannot stay without oxygen. We breathe in oxygen and give out carbon dioxide. So oxygen is said to be one of the essential element. It can also occur extensively in the combined forms on the earth's crust. So in the crust you can find these oxides from most of the metals, metal oxides, right? And the same way you can also see they form carbonates, sulfates, all this can also be formed along with this oxygen. So this oxygen which is present is usually given out during the process of photosynthesis. We all know that during the process of photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is utilized and oxygen is given out. Oxygen is given out, which is being utilized by other living organisms during the process of respiration. Not only that, we use up oxygen to inhale. At the same time, the oxygen will help in breakdown of the food particles in the human body, in every living organism, so that they can obtain energy. And this energy is used up to carry out various metabolic activities in the body. That is said to be a biological pathway. The levels of oxygen in the atmosphere are usually maintained by three different processes. One is combustion, one is respiration, the other is recycling of oxygen is usually maintained in three different forms. One is combustion, respiration, formation of oxides of nitrogen. So this will help in recycling the oxygen which is present in the atmosphere. And the major process which will help in recycling the oxygen in the atmosphere is process of photosynthesis. So keep planting trees around you so that you can have a lot of oxygen and fresh air. Then finally, we'll do with ozone layer. As I've told you, oxygen is present in the form of a element. So when you write about the elemental form, you just write it as O, right? And when it comes to the molecular form, you write it as two atoms of oxygen combined to form a molecule of oxygen. So this oxygen which is present, it combines with elemental oxygen to form a gas called ozone, which is nothing but O3, a gas called ozone. And this ozone which is present, what does it do? It will help in trapping the harmful radiations in the atmosphere. But as I've told you, due to global warming and greenhouse effect, gradually this ozone layer started depleting. And this depletion is seen in the regions like Antarctica, and now in 2019 this is prominently seen in Australia also. Most of the places in Australia are also affected by ozone depletion. Now there comes a question. What happens if there is a hole in the ozone? And what are the reasons for ozone hole formation? Yeah, this ozone hole is formed usually due to the extensive usage of CFCs. What do you mean by CFC? These are the compounds like chlorofluorocarbons. Now there comes a question. From where do we get these chlorofluorocarbons? These chlorofluorocarbons are usually emitted from the compressors of your AC, compressors of your refrigerators, and they are non-reactive. But when they come in across with ozone, they react quickly and start forming a hole on the surface of ozone. So the CFCs were extensively released during a decade of 10 years from 2000 to 2010, which had led to the depletion in the ozone layer. By the time we have realized that there is a hole in the ozone, it was almost a bigger portion of the ozone was being depleted, right? And when I tell you that this ozone depletion is done, it will help in penetration of many harmful radiations. We know that the solar energy which is emitted is having so many radiations present in it. Like you have different rays like X-rays, cosmic rays, alpha rays, beta rays, you have radio waves, you have electromagnetic waves. So there are different waves which are transmitted through this solar energy. And there are few radiations which are harmful when they come in contact with the human body or any living organism. So this ozone which is present, it will form a protective layer protecting the organisms on the Earth's crust. Now, due to this hole or due to the depletion which is caused in the ozone is helping those radiations to directly penetrate onto the Earth's crust, which will lead to different issues like skin cancers and other things. So, this ozone depletion has to be stopped. So, how do we stop this ozone depletion? Now, once the hole has formed, you can't go put cement and fill it, right? It is not your house where you have a leakage and you just call the plumber or you call a mason and ask the mason to fix it up. We can't do that. There is no mason. Nature cannot be redefined, right? It is, you have to accept it as it is, right? So, this the hole which is formed cannot be filled in. But only thing we can do is we can minimize the usage of the CFCs. That's the reason nowadays when you go to buy some ACs or refrigerators, you see that there is a sticker which is labeled on it giving a 3-star rating, 5-star rating, and they also mention on it as eco-friendly. What do you mean by eco-friendly? That means there are other gases which are being substituted instead of CFCs in these electronic devices so that the CFCs will not be produced into the atmosphere, which will cause depletion of ozone. Though these gases are little harmful, they are released into the atmosphere and they don't deplete the ozone layer. So this usage of CFCs has been reduced since over a period of 8 to 9 years, due to which we see that the depletion has been minimized or controlled to some extent. So this ozone is nothing but it is a protective layer around the Earth's crust, which will not let the harmful radiations to penetrate.